Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth. Today, we're going to be talking about e-commerce, from making it to marketing it. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, Boulay Group, Highland Bank, Minnesota Sales, Romaine Berg, and the Network Connect. I'd also like to introduce today's speaker, Darin Lynch, founder and CEO of Irish Titan. Welcome, Darin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it very much. Liking the green sport coat you have on.
Yeah, there's green here, green threads on my shirt, green shoes on, but you'll have to take my word for that.
All right. And how about the green coat of armor there in the back?
Yes, this night that I was fortunate enough to inherit when I bought my house 6-7 years ago, and of course it's been painted green and then placed here in the office, and then moved into my office specifically with all these Zoom calls that we've been doing over the last few months.
Well, very nice. Excuse me?
I see your green outfit.
Yes. So just for you, repping the official color. Absolutely. So contact information is darin.lynch@irishtitan.com. That will also be in the info section if you want to add any comments or ask any questions. So Darin, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your firm, various activities that you're up to.
Sure. So I'm the founder and CEO of Irish Titan. Irish Titan is an e-commerce agency. We've been in business for 16 years now. We're located here in Minneapolis, out at West End, right behind the West Side Volkswagen. If everybody or if anyone knows that, we're in what used to be an old Nestle plant. So it's industrial chic, as they sold me. And people who live in the neighborhood say that it did used to smell like hot chocolate when Nestle was operating. So that's kind of cool. So what we do is we strategize, market, and build e-commerce sites. We do all of that, more importantly, within this notion of business first, online second. Many of you on here maybe have heard me talk about this ad nauseum, but business first, online second is our why, to quote Simon Sinek speak, in the start with why model. We have a trademark that's framed and hanging up by our door. So that's what we do.
Okay. And then speaking of your space there, as far as I know, you're the only firm in town that has a bat pole.
That's probably true. I guess I don't know that for a fact, right? It's kind of like whether or not Bigfoot exists. We don't know that he or she doesn't. I guess I don't know that there aren't any others, but I don't know of any. And given the ordeal I had to endure to get that bat pole in here legally, and to comply with city regulations, which I'm always a giant fan of, I would assume there aren't any other bat poles in town. We have a bat pole / fire pole, and the St. Louis Park Fire Department does not.
Okay, so maybe for a future show, we can have folks going on the bat pole and show the audience that.
Right, and I can route our bat pole waiver form ahead of time if that would make it a little more efficient once people are here.
Absolutely. So speaking of the bat pole, you're very well known for the culture that you've purposely created there at Irish Titan. And we actually had 2 questions come in ahead of time regarding just that, your culture. One was from Eric M. and one from Steve V. Both of them are longtime listeners and supporters of Club E. And the questions are, have you seen a perceived change in your team's culture during the COVID experience? And then how are you trying to keep the spirit alive at Irish Titan while you're all social distancing and working from home?
Great questions. That topic in and of itself could serve as the entirety of our conversation today, what we riff on. To answer those sort of in sequence and then lump it together, I haven't really witnessed a change in our culture. I think that our culture is pretty well defined. It's the combination of our golden circle, to use Simon Sinek speak, our why is business first, online second, our how is partnerships, not transactions, and our what is e-commerce agency. That golden circle is one of the cornerstones of our culture. Another cornerstone is POTUS, which is not a political reference. It stands for passion, ownership, teamwork, impact, and skills. Those are our 5 internal values. I did 10, but maybe 5 on each hand. So those are our 5 internal values. Those serve as the cornerstones of our culture, with shenanigans kind of wrapped around it. That's how we put a little bit of a spin on it to be indicative of the sort of irreverent but still mischievous and nice professionally focused culture. So that has remained. I think that what we have done, though, to navigate these times is take intentional steps and measures to extend our culture. So people have perhaps heard me discuss before how one of our traditions, one of our customs, one of our rituals are marbles. We have 4 jars of marbles at each of our 2 main doors. We have 3 jars of what we've now titled virgin marbles, and I'll get to why we've had to title those here in a little bit. Each of those jars is color coded. So there's a jar of green marbles, yellow marbles, and red marbles. And every day when people leave, they take one of those virgin marbles and throw in the bigger jar that has the combination of marbles over the course of the year. If it's a good day, people are supposed to throw green marbles. If it's an okay day, yellow, and if it's bad, red. We use that as sort of a visual barometer or thermometer, depending on which meteorological theory you want to take, I guess, over the course of the year to see how the year's going. And if we see a few days where there are a lot of reds, that gives us as leaders and as peers for each other cause for concern, and we can reach out and see what's going on and what's causing that. That's a really important part of our culture. So one of the things we've done to extend our culture is created a website where we can do that virtually every day. It's irishtitanmarbles.com, and quite honestly, anybody listening can go out there and throw a marble. So it's irishtitanmarbles.com, and we still do that every day. And we're doing that to sort of try to recreate our culture while we're not here. I'm not going to talk too long about this, but just to close the loop on why I mentioned we named those marbles virgin marbles. We rolled out our return to work plan last week. We are not returning to work yet. We are going to start to allow Titans to come back next week. We've divided everybody into 2, what we refer to as clans, right? Not groups. We try to live up our Irish brand and make that pretty consistent. So we have 2 clans. We have clan bagpipes. No, we're starting with, I think it's bagpipes. Clan bagpipes can be here on Monday and Tuesday, and anybody that's assigned to that clan can choose to be here or not. So if people who are a little bit more cautious in coming back, that's fine. We respect that. Some of you who might be more confident, that's fine. We respect that too. Clan kilts can be in here on Thursday and Friday, and we alternate the Wednesdays between the 2 clans. The reason I talked about the marbles and labeling them as virgin marbles before they're thrown in the bigger jar is because we're going to disinfect those marbles so that they're ready to be used for the people who come in here. And it was part of our return to work plan amongst a whole bunch of other things that we did to make it safe for people to come back. To wrap up, our culture actually, I would say, has remained really strong. I wouldn't quite say thrived, because I wouldn't say it's been better without people here. We're sort of built on people being here, and we attract people who want to be here. But there has been a palpable sense of teamwork amongst each person, each Titan, and how they've pitched in. We've got a lot of great work done. We've done things like an activity challenge. We do a Friday Zoom newscast, as we call it, that's a little bit lighthearted. We've done a lot of things to make sure people are still feeling connected, and POTUS is remaining in force right now. So I think that's what we can be proud of, actually.
And then I know that you've actually hired a few people during the stay-at-home order, and so you had to onboard a few people in this environment.
Yes, yeah. So we hired 5 people, all of whom, if I recall correctly, yes, all 5 had been hired before March 11th, which was the day that everything started to change when the NBA suspended their season. The Big Ten tournament at first was going to be played with no fans in attendance. I think the next day it changed, et cetera. But I remember pretty vividly it was March 11th. At that point, we already had all 5 of these people hired. I gave some thought as to whether or not we wanted to move forward with that, but wanted to because we plan on growing. And I suspected that our business specifically, and if not our business specifically, at least our industry would fare well during these times, or at worst, even if we suffered, be on the early part of the recovery curve. And good talent's hard to find. So we remained committed to those 5 new Titans who've been fantastic hires, and they will sort of forever be grouped in my mind as sort of like the group of 5, right, with NCAA groupings and those sorts of things. We hadn't onboarded remotely, and that was a shift. I think that by the end we were much better than at the beginning, because there's a different approach, and there's less effectiveness, if you will, with some of the things that can't happen organically when you're just walking down the hall with somebody, and you have to be doing it at home and scheduling more Zooms and those sorts of things. But I think it's gone really well. They've definitely become part of the team. They're sort of embedded now as legacy Titans.
All right, great. So for our audience out there, if you have a question, put it into the comments field. And if you'd like to be entered into the drawing, hashtag eComm, E-C-O, and it's 2 M's here at this shop, hashtag eComm, put it in the comment field, and there's going to be 3 winners who will get an SEO audit from Irish Titan. This is a special opportunity for our Club E audience. So again, it's hashtag eComm, and 3 folks will get a SEO audit. All right, so for our discussion, let's start with the making it phase, and then we'll go to the marketing it phase. So what does e-commerce even mean?
Well, it's as someone who's been in the industry since 1998, the first e-commerce site I worked on was for a Lawson software consulting company, and Office Max was our client. We were working on their e-commerce site. It surprised me when people have asked, well, what do you even mean by e-commerce? And so that's been a good check to make sure we're not taking for granted that everybody knows what we mean when we say it. So if you want people to pay you online for anything, that is e-commerce. And it could range from 1 product to 1,000 products, or it could be virtual. So when you sign up to attend Club E or other events, if you go to Eventbrite to register for some company's annual client partner appreciation event that may or may not be held at the local West End, for example, if you're paying to register and attend that event, that's e-commerce. So e-commerce simply refers to the notion that you want people to pay you for something online. And then from there, it can cover a lot of different bases, cover a lot of ground, and take on shapes that change rapidly over time.
Okay. And you mentioned a little earlier that you thought your folks would hold together well in this virus period because e-commerce might do well. You also thought, well, gee, if you didn't do so well, you'd be on the front end of the recovery. How has e-commerce actually been affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, so e-commerce has, by and large, performed pretty well. I think that with retail largely dead right now and closed by law, those of us who've needed to buy product, whether it's been more essentials or more discretionary sorts of items that might give us a little bit of lift in our spirit, though e-commerce was our only route. That was our only alternative. It was our only outlet. And so e-commerce as a whole is probably going to accelerate in growth. It already was accelerating. It was growing, depending on your metric, 10 to 12. Sometimes it would be 20%, depending on how they quantify it. That's only going to accelerate. So that curve is going to accelerate. Of course, within that, there are certain verticals that are performing better or not as well as others. Some discretionary categories aren't doing as well. Apparel. People aren't buying as much apparel, at least of a professional nature, right? So slacks, for example, are not selling well. There's been less of a decline in sales with shirts and tops because sometimes people might be wearing, a nice shirt and maybe sweatpants because of all these Zoom calls. On the other hand, home fitness equipment has exploded. That's, if I could own one business right now that I don't, it'd be some home fitness business, because that's gone crazy with the gyms closed and people struggling with extra time on their hands, although a lot of the sins have also increased with the home delivery of alcohol, for example. So certain categories are doing very well right now, but e-commerce is definitely proving the value, and I think it's going to actually set the table for a continued change in that retail experience. You didn't necessarily ask this, but I'll answer it anyway, right? We'll see where we go. That people have long talked about the death of retail and bricks and mortar and those sorts of things, which is overblown, first of all. Bricks and mortar has been doing just fine, but those who didn't invest in a good online experience were the ones that were really suffering, unless they had a really strong in-store experience. I think that going forward, for the foreseeable future, there's probably going to be social distancing enforced in stores, in retail stores. And if you're going to create those barriers and those traffic flows using milk crates like we all used in our college dorm rooms, right? Or Amazon boxes, nobody's going to want to come to your store. They'll just order online. On the other hand, if you think you have something that people might still want to come in the store for, and you can create an experience that is still aesthetically pleasing, people are still going to want that outlet. So I think that COVID-19 is going to drive e-commerce growth to accelerate, and it's going to also accelerate that change in experience that people expect in the physical stores.
Okay. What considerations does a company need to have as they kind of look through the beginnings and strategizing around an e-commerce project?
Well, those are pretty broad, and I'll stay away from, we couldn't cover all of them in here, but things like what product, how you're going to source it, pricing strategies, those sorts of things I'll stay away from. I'll stay away from brand as a term too, although some of the things I'm going to mention, we'll touch on that. But first of all, who are you selling to? What is their profile? Come up with a name of that person if that's helpful. Think about the decisions they make, the devices they use, what might prompt them to come to your site, what might prompt them to leave your site, how many times they might come to your site before making a decision and a purchase, what inspires them along that path to purchase. So if you can nail that customer and that profile, who you're trying to sell to, that makes everything downstream much, much easier, because then you need to begin to think about where on that commodity to brand spectrum does your product fall. Amazon is a super common topic, right? Like everybody thinks, well, I want to sell on Amazon, or not everybody, but a lot of people, I want to get on Amazon. I'll be able to make a lot of money selling on Amazon. Well, you might, but if you have a product that is very branded and or you care a lot about your customer's experience with your brand, Amazon might not be the right channel for you. On the other hand, if you're selling green iPhone cases that are basically a commodity, Amazon might be a good channel for you. So determining where you are on that spectrum is a consideration. I think that the often overlooked aspects of an operational underpinning the e-commerce are important, because everybody thinks skin deep on e-commerce. What's it going to look like? What's my URL going to be? Can I come up with a sexy name for my URL? Well, that can be important, but how are you going to handle customer service? How are you going to handle fulfillment? How are you going to handle the packaging and the shipping? All of that needs to be considered before you can really start to execute. And then, of course, you need to get to your business model, or a financial model, I guess, is a little bit more in line with what I was thinking. Do you have revenue projections? And do you have those both top down and bottoms up? And what I mean by that is, okay, you want to be $1 million company. Great, that's good. From a bottoms up perspective though, how many products are you going to have to sell to achieve that? And then if you don't adjust for any seasonality, how many products would that be per week and per day? And can you fulfill that? Or do things start to break down? Additionally, below the line, so below your gross margin, how are you going to allocate your budget for marketing investment, right? Because generally 7 to 10, 7 to 12% of revenue is a targeted investment for marketing for an established company. But if you're a newer company, it should probably be higher than that. And so you need to think through all of those pieces before going too far down the path.
Sure. And then speaking of going too far down the path, what are the various platforms that folks should consider? And then what might prompt them to upgrade to a more expensive, higher level e-commerce platform?
Yeah, so there will be platforms that people have heard of that I'll mention, and maybe some that people haven't, because platforms, you can slice and dice them in multiple ways. There will be platforms that are content driven that have e-commerce as sort of a plugin. And examples of that would be WordPress and Drupal, amongst others. And probably most people on listening to us have heard of WordPress and maybe even Drupal too. Then there are platforms whose origin stories, I'm a big comic book fan, so I like to say origin story. There are platforms whose origin stories are rooted in e-commerce, and those would be Shopify, which a lot of people have heard of, BigCommerce, Magento, all of which are very common. Then there are more integrated systems like NetSuite or Salesforce, and those often have financial systems, CRM systems, and e-commerce systems, which you would argue none of those are necessarily best of breed because they're doing all of it. So the advantage is the integration. So those would be the list of platforms. And I think it is important to keep in mind what that origin story is, because if they're rooted in content like WordPress and Drupal, they're just not going to have all the advanced e-commerce capabilities that an e-commerce origin platform will. Now, that said, you might not need those. So it doesn't necessarily make them better or worse. It's just that is what they are. And that sort of leads to the question of what prompts you to upgrade to more sophisticated, which usually means more expensive, e-commerce systems. Could be things like you want to start to expand into international business. Could be that you're expanding into more complex SKUs and SKU structure. If you're selling one product and it doesn't really have too many variations, then you don't need too much e-commerce functionality from a SKU product management perspective. But if you're selling 1,000 products and some of them have 5 variations and some have 7, that starts to be complex enough that you might need to upgrade. Could be other features and functionality that your business is graduating up to. For example, subscription e-commerce has been seeing a bump lately. That's been around for a while, where you pay X dollars a month maybe for your vitamins or your food or the clothes that sometimes people would get every month and then pick what they want in return. Oops, I'm up my night. That subscription sort of commerce has been growing here during COVID. And there are certain platforms that are prepared for that and certain platforms that aren't. So if you don't have subscription commerce, but now are wanting to add that, that might be the motivation to upgrade to a different platform.
So you mentioned earlier you started your career in the late 90s. So 20 years plus, you've probably seen thousands and thousands and thousands of e-commerce sites. What do you see as the most common front-end planning mistake that companies make?
I think that the most, it varies a little bit. Sometimes we have had clients whose design is prioritized based on colors rather than how to facilitate clients or customers moving through the path of purchase on their site, right? So that would be a front-end mistake. I think that if we put some more meat on those bones about specific features and functionality, for example, I think one of the things that is overlooked far too much is abandoned shopping carts, because abandoned shopping cart functionality is pretty easy to turn on and that's a pretty high return. And with most e-commerce systems now, it's either built in or easy to build into it. And so abandoned shopping cart is low-hanging fruit that is really, really frequently overlooked. I would also argue that I think people get hung up on social marketing and overlook the value and ROI that you'll have with email marketing as well, because as you start to build that list, the bigger your list becomes, the greater your ROI. It doesn't cost really anything more to send 1,000 emails compared to 100, and that will build over time without that much effort. So I think email is overlooked as a digital marketing channel still too.
And then we had a question that came in from the audience tied into the question I just asked about common mistake. During the COVID period, are there things that folks should be doing with their website right now or mistakes that they might be making with their website?
Yeah, I think that my response to that would be first driven by what are you doing with your business and how confident are you in it? Because if you're confident in your business, then I would say now is the time to double down on it and invest in it. So if your website is a little bit antiquated or you're not selling online at all, but you have an opportunity to do that or improve it, and you're confident in your business and your ability to run that business and grow it, now would be the time to look at investing in that. And investing doesn't necessarily mean money. This isn't an Irish Titan commercial. It's time, talent, and treasure, right? Like, you might just need to say, you know what? I trust my ability to grow this business. I'm going to invest more in our social marketing right now, because depending on what your business does, lifestyle content might be what drives your business. If you're selling a health food product, that's largely driven by lifestyle content, testimonials, videos of it, aspirational content that maybe shows what you can look like if you eat it, in theory, right? Those sorts of things. You can invest in that sort of content yourself, and you don't have to rebuild your website. So I think the mistake that I'm seeing is people not investing in their business, not just the digital side of it, when there's an opportunity right now to do that.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, a lot of folks just hit the brakes on their marketing in general. And yeah, I'd agree with you, a big mistake. So another question from the audience, Sam, longtime listener, and you're having a little sip there, wanted to know, since it is happy hour, what you were drinking.
This is just water, but it is out of my Iowa Hawkeye jug. One of the things, when we kicked this off, Rick said, tell a little bit about you and your company. I just talked about Irish Titan. The only headline I'll mention about me is I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and I am a Hawkeye. So I'm drinking out of my Iowa Hawkeye jug, just water for now, maybe disappointingly to some, and to some degree to myself.
Well, I know you were on stage at your last eComm forum, and you're having a little cocktail there. So,
yeah, I'll be having something later. And I thought about doing something for this, but I wanted to make sure to maintain the professionalism, which is why, I didn't cut my hair. I did trim my beard a little bit, though, but you probably can't even tell.
Yeah, looking nice. I'm sure GQ will be calling for a photo shoot real soon.
Right.
So you actually had to have looked pretty hard for a green Iowa Hawkeye thing, because isn't everything black and gold?
Nope. E-commerce. You can go online and order a green Iowa Hawkeye Camelback.
All right. All right. So now let's shift gears. Say that a company has their e-commerce site. How do they start planning for the future? And the planning might be, hey, I might as well start looking for a private island to buy, because my bank account is going to be exploding, especially when everybody's locked into their house. Right. So what's the reality for folks that are getting stars in their eyes about their e-commerce site?
That is one of the absolute most common mistakes we encounter, although we encounter it less now than we used to, but that build it and they will come mentality, right? And so starting a website thinking you're just going to make a lot of money is kind of like starting a rock band just to meet the girls or meet the guys. There needs to be more to it than that, and more planning to that. So when you're building it, and actually even before you start to embark on your website build project, you need to have some sense of the plan for how you're going to drive people to your site. As your site's being built, that's when, because I'm assuming most people on this call are not going to be the ones actually doing the design or development for their site. And so if that's the case, that's the time that you're allowed to put your fingerprints on that marketing funnel to attract your buyers, right? Because there's, depending on how people look at the funnel, I used to talk about it in 3 stages. Now I talk about it in 5, or the way I was doing it earlier, 5, 10. I don't know why I did that earlier. So there's awareness, acquisition, conversion, retention, and advocacy. Those are the 5 that I think about now. And
5. All right, folks. Well, that was interesting. Hope you're still with us. Took a little detour there. All good, though. The gremlins at Irish Titan were playing a little shenanigans on us. Since that is part of their culture, Darin was able to get back up and running. So we're back here. You're just starting to talk about, hey, can we buy a private island, because build it, they will come, and life will be good.
Right. And that is the absolute wrong mentality to have. An e-commerce operation is more like farming than hunting. It's an ongoing exercise where you have to have faith in what you do in the spring and work on it over the summer, start to see some of the crops, some of the corn emerge from the ground, and then you start to see the payoff in the fall. It's not a one-time go out over the weekend and come back with food for the fall. So you need to build that site, but equally, if not more importantly, is you need to develop your strategies for those 5 parts of the funnel that I mentioned, so that you are continuing to build awareness, continuing to attract people to your site, doing the things that will convert them into customers, taking care of them, and then every 3 to 5 years, rebuilding your site.
All right. So any quick growth hacks for getting visitors to a site?
I think that the growth hacks are to some degree well known, depending on how long people have been in the industry and what you're doing. You can drive traffic to your site with paid media. That's a fact. But then you pay for it. The way I like to think about paid media versus SEO is if you open up a restaurant, which right now would not be the time to open up a restaurant, so I might need to come up with a different analogy. But if you open up a restaurant, you need to pay to have your ad in the circulars, maybe in city pages, those sorts of places, so people start to see the name of your restaurant and become familiar with it, because you're not going to have any word of mouth. Over time, you might be able to dial that back because your word of mouth should start to take over. And so the paid search activities across channels can drive traffic, whether that is in Google ads or in Facebook profiling and targeted ads there. Facebook and the social media channels are highly, highly targetable, for better or worse, right? Sometimes on the receiving end, we don't like that. But those are some ways you can drive traffic, have strong calls to action in your email or on your site. And then one thing I wanted to make sure to mention is a common mistake when people are driving traffic to their site with specific campaigns is they drive them to your homepage, and instead you should be driving them to a targeted landing page that reinforces the message that they clicked on that you paid for them to click on, so that you're not sending them to a generic page, paying to send them to a generic page, and then they lose interest and bounce.
Okay. So talk a little bit more about social marketing and the work on e-commerce. Dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, so the different channels have different uses from an e-commerce perspective. So if you think about Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and let's include Twitter, they all serve different purposes. From an e-commerce perspective, Twitter doesn't really serve that much value. I would argue in general, Twitter doesn't serve that much value. I like to say that it's just like tweeting for people who don't have friends, or it's like texting for people who don't have friends. But Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram all serve different purposes. If you are a B2B company, Instagram might not make that much sense. On the other hand, LinkedIn probably makes a ton of sense. And Facebook kind of bleeds between the two. So you can use targeting that each of those platforms provide, so that you can present your ad to those people that you think will find the most appeal to it. So on Facebook, it might be their likes and their interests and some of the music they follow or some of the sites they visit. On LinkedIn, it might be job title. It might be posts that they've interacted with. And on Instagram, that is highly B2C. That is candy for people who want to make quick impulse purchases. And I can attest to that. Now that I'm on my phone, I should walk out there and show you, because I have a number of green jackets that I've bought directly off Instagram after I've had maybe one glass too many of whiskey. And they end up coming, they don't fit because they're from overseas, and they never end up working. But they're candy for people who want to make quick impulse purchases from Instagram. So those different channels can be used differently based on what you're selling and who you're selling to.
All right. And the old adage about marketing is half of it's working, they just don't know what half. How can folks measure their marketing success in e-commerce?
Well, that was the root of this question is one of the reasons I got into e-commerce and digital, because you could measure it. It's not magical or mystical, it's measurable. And so with e-commerce, it's similar to digital. You can see how many people are coming to your site. You can see how long they're on your site, what pages they're going to. And the attribution capabilities have grown substantially over the years because there are still challenges. Excuse me, if somebody comes to your site from a paid search campaign, but doesn't buy, but then they come back a week later by typing your domain into their URL and buy, there's been progress in how you can attribute that purchase to that campaign. So I think the best way to ensure that you're maximizing your attribution models so that it's measurable and not just magical is making sure your analytics are set up correctly and using, and by that I mean Google Analytics, and then using e-commerce specific tools, whether it's within Google Analytics or maybe Drip, which is a local software company that does a lot of email from an e-commerce perspective, or Digital, or any one of the e-commerce focused marketing campaigns. They will have attribution, they'll have tag, they will have capabilities that maximize your ability to see your ROI. And along with ROI, equally important is your customer acquisition cost. And those platforms will allow you to measure that.
Okay. How about any overlooked marketing practices?
I think that I covered that a little bit earlier.
Okay.
I'll answer and see if anything new comes. But the abandoned shopping cart I spoke about. Email marketing is overlooked, or at least it was for a while. I don't hear as many people talking, dismissing, maybe I should say, the upside of email campaigns now. Maybe it still happens and I just don't hear as much of it. But if you are dismissive of the impact an email campaign can have for you, don't be. I'll twist the question a little bit to answer with something that I haven't yet touched on. Now I sound like a politician, right? Just changing the question so I can say whatever I want. One of the most overlooked aspects of e-commerce is content. And that's said frequently when people talk about digital. But from an e-commerce perspective, when we say content, we're talking about the content on your product detail page and any lifestyle content that might be driving your purchases. So I mentioned earlier that if you sell a healthcare product, you're going to want to have video and testimonials and lifestyle content that will help people to be inspired to make that purchase. That is super critical and gets overlooked a lot, but no less than the information on your product detail page. And so that product detail page where people can add to cart or buy now, that is crucial to include testimonials, or if it's a more complex buy, if it's B2B, you're going to want FAQs, product detailed specs, maybe videos, how-to videos there. That product detail page is an overlooked page that should be the apex of your conversion. That should be the page that drives people to make the purchase.
Say that again. What should be?
The product detail page.
Okay, product detail page. All right, just wanted to make sure that the audience heard that. So as you look at the marketing funnel, what's the most important one? Is it the product detail page, or is there some other part of the marketing funnel that you think is important?
Well, I would tie the product detail page to conversion in the funnel. And I'm kind of wired for awareness and conversion. Those are the two parts of the funnel that I personally resonate the most with. I would say that that's a little bit of beauty's in the eye of the beholder, because there will be people who could argue with all kinds of data and facts why any one of those 5 steps is most important. I think as your business is growing, right, awareness is most important at first. If you're starting your business, because if nobody's aware of you, they can't buy. And then after that, it would be the acquisition. How do you get people to your site? But if you have an established business, I'm not sure. I think that awareness, which ties to advocacy, really, if you're an established business, the two of them work together, and conversion are the ones that most motivate me. I think that what people can benefit from is understanding those 5 stages of the funnel and realizing and understanding which of those funnels steps most appeal to them, and then living true to that.
Yep. So I asked a question earlier a little bit about common mistakes on the front end planning. What about common mistakes on websites that are up and running? People will call you and say you go in to do a pitch, or maybe they are having some problems. And when you're going out to see sites that are already up and running, what are some of the common mistakes that you come across?
Yeah, so a very common mistake is that analytics are improperly installed. So their pages are not properly registering visitors or conversions, or where those visitors are coming from, where they might be going to. So that's a very, very common mistake that we've found. I think that another common mistake with existing sites is that the business has outgrown that site and the site no longer tells the story of what that business is doing today. Maybe there's new products that aren't on the site. Maybe they're trying to appeal to a different customer, or maybe they're trying to appeal to a different motivating behavior. Um, there's a company called Branch Basics that sells holistic cleaning supplies, and they are doing extremely well in e-commerce right now. And one of the reasons is they rebuilt their site a few years ago to more specifically appeal to that spirit of being clean, of being renewable, of that 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 movement that's been emerging. Prior to that, they already had that product, but their site wasn't saying that yet. And so that's another common mistake that we see, which is usually one of the triggers that prompts someone to pull the to move forward on redoing their site.
Okay. So we're getting towards the end here. Again, for the audience that would like to go into a drawing for an SEO audit, it's hashtag eComm. Again, hashtag eComm for that SEO audit. Darin, as we wind up here today, and again, thank you very much for joining us. Any final kind of thoughts, anything you want to tie this up with, any other words of wisdom?
Sure. Well, one thing I'll offer is because we had some technical difficulties, which were my fault, which is not a good thing since we're a technology company. We did switch our internet provider, and it was already scheduled, and it happened during all this stay at home. So we're experiencing a few problems. But I do have these nifty green foam top hats. And so I can send some of those to anybody who endured that that failure on my behalf. So that's an additional prize for anybody that's so inclined. I think moving on to a little bit more serious wrap up, I guess. I think that we've been talking about e-commerce for a long, long time at Irish Titan. It's what I've talked about at Club E multiple times. It's what you and I have talked about over the years a lot. And I think that we've all been experiencing e-commerce more and more, but now everybody's forced to be experiencing it. So maybe generations or people who weren't all that warm to it before for whatever reason, now it's their only option. So if you're not there and you have product to sell, you should be considering it. If you are there but have invested sort of lukewarm into the channel, might be good to consider growing that investment if you believe in your business. If, on the other hand, you're a service provider who has some clients that aren't doing e-commerce or are doing it sort of lighthearted, these are the sort of conversations you can be having with them too. It's only going to accelerate in growth now.
And then you made something come to mind. We kind of danced around a little bit earlier, but is there a minimum number of products a company should have to have an e-commerce site?
Nope, nope. You can have an e-commerce site that is one and only one product, and that could be you could be a sizable business with millions of dollars of revenue with just one product. If you have just one product, that could help you manage your e-commerce spend to be from a investment in building your site to be a little bit more moderate, because typically the fewer products you have, generally the simpler your e-commerce requirements are. But you could have one and only one product and be an e-commerce business. On the other hand, you could have thousands of products and still not sell very much. So just because you have more products doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have more revenue.
Okay. And then if folks wanted to find you, reach out to you, how would they do that?
So I'm pretty easy to find. I don't hide myself very well. It's not very easy to do that anyway. But you can reach me. Our site is irishtitan.com, and you can contact me directly from the company page, where then you can see my bio. You can see me on LinkedIn. I am on Twitter. I don't tweet too much. Generally, it's to like Hawkeye tweets or Steelers tweets, those sorts of things. But LinkedIn and our website are two easy ways to get a hold of me. I'm on Facebook, and you can email me directly at darin.lynch@irishtitan.com.
Yep. And then if they haven't figured it out, you are a fan of green products. And so anybody who really wants to catch your eye, send Darin something green. And then also Darin can act as a host at the Hawkeye games, because my dad and I went last fall. Unfortunately, it was a losing outcome for us Gopher fans, but nonetheless, you can act as a host at the Hawkeye games.
I can, yes. I'm probably a more hospitable host when we're on the winning side of that. But that was a great game. That was a good experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a very good game. Darin, thank you very much for being here. Again, for the folks out there, hashtag eComm, and you can get an SEO audit from Irish Titan, as well as the little foam green hat. And for folks that want to reach Darin, his contact info is out on the website, as well as on the comments field below. Thank you very much, Darin. And next time I want to see you or somebody show us how to use the back pole.
All right. Promise. We'll do that.
All right. Thank you.